The CEO, who humiliated him in front of 20 executives that morning, was now trapped in a collapsing stairwell, screaming for help. Marcus Rivera, Michigan T-educated engineer turned janitor, held the only radio. He could walk away, no one would know. She'd destroyed his dignity hours ago, but his 11-year-old daughter's words echoed, "Dad, what makes someone a hero?" The answer would cost everything. Marcus Rivera arrived at the Hartwell Industries Tower at 4:30 on a cold Monday morning, his breath forming small clouds in the darkness. At 42, his hands still bore the calluses of precision work, though now they gripped industrial cleaning supplies instead of engineering drafting tools. The gleaming marble lobby reflected his worn uniform back at him, a ghost moving through spaces designed for different lives. In his wallet, folded carefully behind his expired engineering license, was a photo of Emma, 11 years old, her smile bright enough to justify any sacrifice. 2 years had passed since he'd traded his Boeing identification badge for a janitor's keycard. The mathematics were simple and cruel. Sarah's cancer treatment had consumed their savings, their home, and ultimately, their future. $18,000 of medical debt remained, scheduled over 10 years of monthly payments that left no room for error. His MIT engineering degree hung in a storage unit he could no longer afford, alongside patents for safety systems that would never see implementation. The building's infrastructure whispered its secrets to him as he worked. 20 years of structural engineering had trained his eyes to see what others missed. The stress fractures in the stairwells, the inefficient HVAC system, hemorrhaging money, the elevator maintenance delays that would eventually cause problems. But pointing these out wasn't his job anymore. His job was to ensure the 42nd floor conference room gleamed before Victoria Hartwell arrived. Victoria entered her domain at 7 sharp that morning, her heels striking marble with metronomic precision. At 38, she commanded the tower her father had built over 40 years, though the weight of that legacy pressed against her shoulders like atmospheric pressure. The hostile takeover attempt from Morrison Enterprises had accelerated in recent weeks, board members questioning whether Richard Hartwell's daughter possessed his steel spine. The prescription anxiety medication in her desk drawer suggested she questioned it too. Her assistant briefed her on the day's battles, while she stood at the window, watching the city wake beneath her. Quarterly projections, board meetings, strategic maneuvers to save the company from circling predators. She'd sacrificed everything for this view, this power, this proof that a woman could be as ruthless as any man in the corporate arena. The cost had been calculated and paid. No family, few friends, and a reputation as the ice queen that she wore like armor. The week unfolded in small cruelties. On Monday, Marcus had been adjusting the conference room thermostat when Victoria entered with potential investors. Her voice cut through the air like winter wind. "Don't touch executive equipment. Wait outside until we're finished." He stood in the hallway for 2 hours, listening to muffled discussions about millions, while calculating whether he could afford Emma's $75 science project materials. Wednesday brought a coffee spill, the executive assistant's hand shaking as brown liquid spread across the floor where Marcus knelt, replacing outlet covers. Victoria passed by, her observation casual in its dismissal. "At least the floor's getting cleaned properly for once." The assistant mouthed sorry when Victoria turned away, but Marcus simply nodded and continued working. Dignity was free, the only thing they couldn't take from him. By Friday morning, the pressure had compressed Victoria into something sharp and brittle. The quarterly board meeting loomed. Hostile board members gathered like wolves, sensing weakness. Marcus entered the conference room for scheduled air filter maintenance, a routine task that couldn't wait. The timing was unfortunate, the reaction explosive. This is why some people make decisions, and others clean up after them. Victoria announced to the room, her voice carrying the false bravado of someone performing strength. Board member Thompson laughed, a harsh sound that encouraged her to continue. "You need to understand your place in this building." Marcus stood perfectly still, the dirty filter in his hands. "My apologies for the disruption, Miss Hartwell." As he turned to leave, Emma's honor roll certificate slipped from his pocket, falling face up on the polished table. The achievement seemed small in this room where million-dollar deals were routine. Victoria glanced at it with practiced disdain. "Maybe focus more on your work than personal items. Some of us are trying to run a company here." The board members chuckled their approval. She'd passed their test, proved she could be as cold as her father. Marcus retrieved the certificate carefully, as if it were made of gold rather than paper, and left without another word. That evening, Marcus sat in his 10-year-old Honda during his break between jobs, watching Emma through the window of the after-school program. She was helping younger children with their homework, patient and kind like her mother had been. The program cost more than he made from his afternoon Uber driving, but it kept her safe until 8 when his night shift ended. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma's teacher. Science fair project proposal excellent. Emma has exceptional aptitude. Materials list attached. $75 for supplies that would showcase his daughter's brilliance. His bank account showed $47 until Tuesday. The credit cards maxed from Sarah's treatment were monuments to choices made from love rather than logic. He opened his laptop, searching for weekend CAD freelance work. His engineering skills remained sharp, even if the industry considered him expired goods after a 5-year gap. One small project might cover Emma's materials if he worked through Saturday night. Sleep was a luxury he'd surrendered long ago. The subsidized housing complex where they lived told its own story of compromise. Riverside Housing Unit, 17B, consisted of 2 bedrooms, intermittent hot water, and neighbors whose struggles mirrored his own. Emma never complained, but Marcus noticed how she did homework in the bathroom when the living room became too cold, how she pretended not to be hungry when they split their last meal before payday. Friday evening brought the storm, a sudden violence of wind and rain that matched Victoria's mood. The hostile takeover documents spread across the 42nd floor conference table told a story of corporate betrayal, board members who'd smiled while sharpening knives. She'd stayed late studying every detail, searching for the weapon that would save her father's legacy. Morrison Enterprises had structured their attack brilliantly, exploiting every weakness in Hartwell's defenses. They'd turned 3 board members already, needed just 2 more for control. Victoria's fingers traced the numbers that spelled potential doom. Stock prices, market valuations, the mathematics of corporate warfare. At 7:15, lightning struck the building's main transformer. The lights flickered, died, then emergency power kicked in with a grinding reluctance that suggested age and poor maintenance. Victoria barely noticed, absorbed in legal language that might mean survival or corporate death. Marcus was covering a sick colleague's shift, grateful for the overtime that would add $30 to Tuesday's check. He knew the building's moods and ailments intimately, and the backup generator's labored breathing concerned him. These 1970s towers had been built with different storms in mind, smaller ones that didn't test every system simultaneously. The generator's stuttering rhythm spoke of deferred maintenance, of quarterly profits prioritized over infrastructure investment. Marcus had written 3 anonymous reports about the building's vulnerabilities, submitted through the suggestion system that promised confidentiality. Each one had disappeared into corporate silence, filed away or discarded by people who saw maintenance as cost rather than investment. The second lightning strike took out the backup power completely. Emergency lighting flickered on in the stairwells, battery-powered and temporary. Victoria finally looked up from her documents, annoyed at the interruption. The elevators would have locked automatically. Safety protocols from a more cautious era. She gathered essential papers, deciding to walk down 42 floors, rather than wait for power to resume. The stairwell door closed behind her with a finality that echoed through concrete bones. Emergency lights cast harsh shadows, making each step uncertain. She'd walked these stairs during fire drills, but never alone, never in the dark, never with rain pounding against the building like fists. Her father had walked these same stairs during construction, checking every floor as his tower rose toward the sky. She remembered being 7 years old, holding his hand as he explained how buildings were like people, strong on the outside, but vulnerable within, requiring constant care to remain standing. At the 31st floor, she heard it. A grinding, tearing sound that belonged in nightmares. Water had been infiltrating the building's bones for years, unaddressed maintenance creating weakness where strength was assumed. The storm had found these vulnerabilities, exploiting them with patient destruction. The stairwell section collapsed between the 30th and 31st floors, with a violence that threw Victoria against the concrete wall. Her ankle twisted, snapped, sent lightning up her leg that competed with the storm outside. When the dust settled, she was trapped in a pocket of space, concrete debris blocking both directions, water beginning to pool from broken pipes. The darkness was complete except for one failing emergency light that flickered like a dying heartbeat. Her phone had shattered in the fall, though the tower's dead zones would have made it useless anyway. She screamed, but the storm swallowed her voice, made her insignificant in a way that power and money couldn't fix. Claustrophobia arrived like an old enemy, bringing memories of being locked in her father's wine cellar at age 7, forgotten during a party, found hours later, sobbing, and changed. The walls pressed closer, or seemed to, darkness, playing tricks that made breathing difficult. The water rose inch by inch, cold enough to steal feeling from her feet. She thought about her father finding her in that cellar, how he'd held her while she shook, promised never to let her be forgotten again. But he was gone now, 5 years in the ground, and she was alone in the dark with water rising and walls closing in. Marcus was checking floors according to emergency protocol, a systematic sweep that janitors performed when others evacuated. He knew this building's weaknesses, had written anonymous reports about the stairwell deterioration that were likely filed and forgotten. The 31st floor stairwell was the worst, water damage making it vulnerable during severe weather. He heard something between thunder crashes, a sound that might have been human or might have been the building settling into new configurations of damage. But 20 years of engineering had taught him to trust his instincts about structures and their failures. The emergency radio crackled when he called, 911, this is Hartwell Industries. Possible person trapped, 31st floor west stairwell. Building has suffered structural damage. Sir, we have multiple emergencies citywide. Fire department estimate 40 minutes minimum. Can you evacuate safely? Marcus looked toward the stairwell access, calculating. He knew this building's secrets, its alternate routes and maintenance passages. I'm going to attempt assistance. I know the building's structure. Sir, we advise you to evacuate immediately. Do not attempt rescue without proper equipment and training. I have 20 years of structural engineering experience. Someone's trapped, and 40 minutes might be too late. The maintenance room provided what he needed: repelling equipment from window washing operations, emergency tools, a headlamp that turned darkness into manageable shadows. His engineering mind mapped routes while his hands worked with remembered precision. Before entering the danger zone, Marcus called Emma's after-school program, explaining he might be late. "Tell her I love her," he said, then ended the call before emotion could weaken resolve. The elevator shaft offered access to the parallel stairwell through the mechanical space. Marcus rappelled down, each floor a measured descent into the building's hidden architecture. At 31, he crawled through the HVAC ducting, following blueprints memorized during 2 years of night shifts when studying the building had filled empty hours. The ductwork groaned under his weight, 20 years of dust and neglect, making each movement precarious. He could hear water rushing somewhere below, the building's circulation system hemorrhaging like severed arteries. The structural supports he passed showed stress fractures that would have horrified his younger engineering self, evidence of slow-motion collapse postponed but not prevented. He found Victoria semi-conscious, hypothermia and shock competing for her body's remaining resources. Her designer suit was torn, revealing the human vulnerability beneath corporate armor. When his headlamp illuminated her face, she flinched. "Miss Hartwell, it's Marcus Rivera. I'm going to get you out." Her voice came from far away. "The janitor? I must be hallucinating. 20 years of structural engineering before I was a janitor, ma'am. I need you to stay awake. Can you tell me where you're hurt?" She tried to focus on his face, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. The man she'd humiliated hours ago was risking his life for hers, his competent hands checking her injuries with professional precision. "My ankle. I can't feel my feet." The water. He worked while she drifted, creating a splint from cleaning supplies and emergency equipment, his hands steady despite the building groaning around them. The path back was blocked, more collapse making return impossible. But Marcus knew this building's secrets. "There's an old maintenance shaft," he explained, helping her stand. "Hasn't been used since the 1980s renovation. It's our way out." She couldn't walk, the ankle refusing weight, so he carried her through passages that existed on no current blueprint. His strength came from loading trucks at Boeing, from carrying Sarah during her final months, from being a father who couldn't afford weakness. "Why?" she asked against his shoulder. "After what I said." "What I did. Because it's the right thing to do," he replied. "Navigating by touch, through absolute darkness. Because you're a human being, in trouble. Because my daughter would never forgive me if I walked away from someone who needed help." The building shuddered, another section failing. But Marcus navigated by touch and memory. They crawled through spaces barely wide enough for bodies. Victoria biting back screams when her ankles scraped against concrete. The maintenance shaft was a vertical nightmare of rusted rungs and failing supports, but it was their only chance. "I can't," Victoria gasped, looking down into darkness. "You can," Marcus said firmly. "I'll be right behind you. One rung at a time. Don't look down, just climb." She climbed through pain that made vision blur, through terror that made muscles lock, through the certainty that each rung would be the one that failed. Marcus stayed close enough that she could feel his presence. His voice steady and reassuring. "You're doing great. 3 more rungs. 2 more. Almost there." When they finally emerged into the lobby, fire department lights were painting everything red and urgent. Victoria gripped his hand with surprising strength, her carefully constructed walls completely demolished. "Don't leave me," she whispered, and for the first time in years, she sounded human. Marcus stayed until the paramedics took over, until the ambulance doors closed, then walked to his Honda and drove to his second job. He couldn't afford to miss the shift, couldn't afford the questions that heroism might bring. Emma needed stability more than he needed recognition. 2 weeks later, Victoria woke in her private hospital room to questions she couldn't answer. Where was the man who'd saved her? The nurses explained he'd stayed until she was stable, then left for work. The idea that someone would save a life then clock in for a night shift broke something in her understanding of the world. She requested his personnel file, reading it in the gray afternoon light. Massachusetts Institute of Technology, graduated summa cum laude, Boeing senior structural engineer, 12 years of excellence, patents for building safety systems that could have prevented her near death. Wife deceased, cancer. Age, 38. Daughter Emma, 6th grade, honor roll. Current address, Riverside Housing Complex, subsidized unit 17, B. She looked it up, finding crime statistics and bedbug complaints, understanding for the first time that some people didn't choose their circumstances. The file contained performance reviews from his janitor position. Exceptional attention to detail, never misses a shift, helps colleagues without being asked. Submitted multiple safety improvement suggestions through anonymous system. She recognized the suggestions, she'd dismissed them as unnecessarily expensive maintenance. Her first attempt at gratitude was a check for $10,000. Delivered through HR. It came back uncashed, with a note written in precise engineering script. I didn't do it for money. She tried promotion next, offering him director of facilities position. His refusal came with an education in economics she'd never received in business school. If my income increases by even $5,000 annually, I lose housing subsidy. Market rent would cost $12,000 more per year. Your promotion would actually cost me money. The benefits cliff, he called it. The space where trying to rise meant falling further. She'd never considered that the system might be designed to keep people in their place, not through malice but through mathematics. Her third attempt was anonymous, a bonus labeled Building Structural Assessment that appeared in his paycheck. He figured it out within days, politely declining in person. My dignity isn't for sale, Miss Hartwell. I have very little, but what I have is mine. 3 weeks after the rescue, they had their first real conversation. Victoria had stayed late working on takeover defense strategies. Genuinely this time. Not performed for anyone's benefit. Marcus entered to clean, and they existed in the space between employer and employee, survivor and saved. I was wrong, Victoria said, surprising herself with the admission. Not just that Friday. About everything. About you. About worth. About what makes someone valuable. Marcus continued emptying wastebaskets, his movements efficient. "Everyone has bad days, Miss Hartwell. Stop being so dignified." I was cruel. Deliberately, calculatedly cruel. He paused then, really looking at her for the first time. Cruelty is usually fear wearing a disguise. "What were you afraid of?" The question unlocked something she'd kept buried beneath quarterly reports and board meetings. That they were right. That I couldn't fill my father's shoes. That being a woman meant being weak, so I had to be twice as cold to be taken seriously. "Your father built this company. Over 40 years. Died at his desk 5 years ago. The board wanted my brother to take over, but he was in prison for securities fraud. I was the consolation prize." Marcus resumed cleaning, giving her space to continue. "They test me constantly. Every meeting is a trial, where I have to prove I'm not just Richard Hartwell's daughter playing dress-up. That morning, with you in the conference room, Thompson was watching. If I'd shown any kindness, any humanity, he would have used it as evidence I was too soft to lead. So you chose to be cruel to someone who couldn't fight back." The truth stung more than her ankle had. "Yes, I chose to hurt you because I could, because it made me feel powerful when I felt powerless. My daughter asks me why some people are mean," Marcus said, aligning chairs with mathematical precision. "I tell her that hurt people, but Emma's smart. She asks why some hurt people choose kindness instead. What do you tell her? That choosing kindness when you've been hurt is real strength. Anyone can pass pain along. It takes courage to let it stop with you." They talked until midnight, two people discovering each other across a chasm of circumstance. Victoria learned about Sarah's battle. The choice between career and caregiving. The slow slide from engineer to janitor that came with grief and debt. Marcus learned about boardroom battles, hostile takeovers, the loneliness of power that felt like drowning in a room full of people. "Sarah was diagnosed right after I'd been promoted to senior engineer," Marcus explained. "Stage 3, pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lived for 2 years through sheer will, wanting to see Emma reach 3rd grade. You gave up everything for her. I gave up a career. I kept everything that mattered. Those last 2 years, being there every day, holding her hand through chemo. Watching Emma read to her mother every night, I wouldn't trade those memories for any corner office." Victoria thought about her own choices, the relationship sacrificed for success, the family she'd never have because pregnancy would show weakness to the board. "I've given up everything that mattered for things that don't." "It's not too late to change that," Marcus said quietly. When she offered to judge Emma's science fair, she meant it. Not as CEO, not as publicity, but as someone trying to learn how to be human again. The science fair was held in the gymnasium of Emma's public school, a building that needed paint and repairs but hummed with children's enthusiasm. Victoria arrived in her simplest clothes, trying to blend in among parents who worked multiple jobs to attend. Emma's project on renewable energy for low-income housing showed her father's influence, precise calculations, innovative solutions, and deep empathy for people struggling with utility bills. When Victoria asked about her inspiration, Emma said simply, "Dad taught me that engineering should help everyone, not just people who can afford it." The media attention came a month later when security footage leaked. Janitor hero saves billionaire CEO became the story everyone wanted to tell. Marcus hated every second of it, especially when Emma came home crying because classmates called her the janitor's daughter like it was something shameful. Victoria tried to control the narrative, making statements about his heroism, his engineering background, the injustice of his circumstances. Each attempt made things worse, painting him as either a charity case or a noble savage, neither of which contained his full humanity. "Every time you try to help publicly," he told her, "you remind everyone I'm beneath you. You can't fix systemic inequality with press releases." She pulled back then, understanding finally that some help was harm dressed in good intentions. 6 months after the rescue, the building's infrastructure failings demanded attention. Insurance required assessment. Consulting firms quoted $2 million for comprehensive analysis. Victoria remembered Marcus's engineering background, making a formal request through proper channels, offering standard industry consulting rates. He accepted on the condition of anonymity. His analysis found 15 critical issues. his solution saving the company $3 million. The board demanded to meet this brilliant consultant. Victoria protected his identity, claiming he preferred privacy. Marcus used the fee to pay down medical debt and finally afford Emma's summer science camp, though he kept his janitor position for the health insurance that meant Emma could see a doctor when needed. 4 months later, Emma collapsed at school. The appendicitis was routine until it wasn't. Complications requiring a specialist surgeon that Marcus's insurance classified as out-of-network. He sat in the waiting room, calculating predatory loan rates when Victoria appeared. "How did you know?" he asked. "Employee Assistance Program flagged it. I've restructured them to actually assist." She sat beside him, not across from him. "The surgeon's been arranged. The difference has been covered. I can't accept. You saved my life. Please let me help save hers." His pride wrestled with his love for Emma. Love won, as it always did. During Emma's recovery, Victoria visited daily with books and games. She learned about Emma's dreams of becoming an environmental engineer, about her favorite subjects, about the mother she barely remembered, but whose kindness she'd inherited. "Dad says Mom would have liked you," Emma told her one afternoon. "He says you're learning to see people the way Mom always did." Victoria had to excuse herself to cry in the hospital bathroom, overwhelmed by the grace of a child who could forgive the woman who'd humiliated her father. They met for coffee in the hospital cafeteria while Emma recovered, talking about engineering and architecture, about buildings, and the people who cleaned them. Victoria saw his brilliance clearly now, but also understood the systemic barriers that kept that brilliance mopping floors. When she suggested he return to engineering, he explained the mathematics of impossibility. 5-year gaps equaled unemployability. After-school care cost more than most engineering entry positions paid, and the benefits cliff meant that earning more often meant having less. She started reforming company policies quietly, raising wages for contract workers, creating advancement paths that included education support and childcare assistance. She couldn't fix society, but she could fix her small corner of it. Other executives noticed her changes, made observations about going soft and forgetting her place. Board member Thompson warned her about maintaining proper boundaries between management and labor. She defended her changes with spreadsheets and projections, never mentioning the janitor who'd shown her that human worth wasn't measured in stock options. A year after the rescue, the hostile takeover attempt reached critical mass. Victoria faced being ousted, her father's legacy lost to corporate raiders. She needed innovation, something to show the board that Hartwell Industries could evolve. She remembered Marcus's old patent, a building safety system that could revolutionize infrastructure management. Together, they worked through nights he wasn't cleaning, developing a presentation that would save $30 million over 5 years. When the board demanded to know who'd created this brilliant proposal, Victoria stood straight and told the truth. Marcus Rivera, our night janitor, former Boeing senior engineer, the man who saved my life when this building tried to kill me. Because we ignored infrastructure in favor of quarterly profits, the room went silent. Thompson started to object. But Victoria had learned to fight from Marcus's example with dignity and facts rather than cruelty and fear. His patent, developed 10 years ago, would have prevented the collapse that nearly killed me. His anonymous safety recommendations, which we ignored, identified every weakness the storm exploited. We've been paying millions to consultants while ignoring brilliance that was cleaning our offices. The board approved the proposal and offered Marcus a position as Director of Sustainable Infrastructure, but only if he stopped being a janitor. The optics, they said, were problematic. Marcus refused initially, needing the benefits for Emma, but Victoria fought for him properly this time. Full benefits, flexible hours for Emma's needs, salary commensurate with his expertise and experience. When he accepted, his janitor colleagues celebrated without jealousy. They'd always known his worth. About time someone saw what we all saw, Carlos said, shaking Marcus's hand. You never forgot where you came from. Don't forget us now. Don't forget us now. On us. Don't too. Never, Marcus promised. First thing I'm doing is making sure every janitor in this building gets proper safety equipment and fair wages. 3 months into his new position, Marcus had transformed building operations, saving millions while improving working conditions for everyone from executives to cleaning staff. Late one evening, they worked together on a project, ordered Chinese takeout, and talked as equals for the first time. "I see you now," Victoria said. "The real you. Not the janitor or the engineer, but Marcus." "I've always seen you," he replied. "Even through the armor. Especially through the armor." When her car wouldn't start in the parking garage, he fixed it like he had that first time, both of them laughing at the symmetry. But this time, when he closed the hood, she kissed him, tentative and questioning. A beginning, rather than a conclusion. "This is complicated," Marcus said. "Everything worth doing is." Victoria responded. They took it slow, Emma always the priority. Professional boundaries at work, private dinners once a week, building something real, on equal ground, rather than fantasy or power dynamics. 18 months after the rescue, they married in a community center with 20 guests. Emma served as maid of honor, her speech simple and perfect. Mom would have liked knowing Dad found someone who sees him. The company had transformed under their partnership, employee-first policies that paradoxically improved profits. Marcus's innovations led the industry, while Victoria learned that strength meant lifting others rather than standing on them. They built a life that honored both their pasts, while creating a future neither could have imagined alone. Success redefined not as power or money, but as partnership, family, and dignity, maintained through every storm. Some mornings, Marcus still arrived early, but now he entered through the front door with his own keycard that said director instead of janitor. The building still whispered its secrets to him, but now people listened when he translated them. Victoria still commanded from the 42nd floor, but her commands came with consideration, understanding that every person in the building had worth beyond their function. The Ice Queen had melted, revealing someone stronger than armor ever made her. Emma thrived with two parents who saw her brilliance, supported her dreams, and showed her daily that love could rebuild what loss had broken. She grew up understanding that heroes weren't people with capes or wealth, but those who chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier, who did right especially when it was hard. The Hartwell Industries Tower still gleamed in the morning sun, but now it gleamed with purpose beyond profit. Every floor from basement to penthouse held people whose worth was recognized, whose dignity was protected, whose stories mattered. Marcus and Victoria had saved each other in different ways, at different times, for different reasons. But ultimately, they'd learned the same lesson, that seeing someone's true worth had nothing to do with what they did for a living, and everything to do with who they chose to be when the storm came and the lights went out, and all that remained was the choice between indifference and action, between cruelty and kindness, between fear